Good afternoon, everyone. So starting the session, right, it's like being a co-pilot to this panel. And I was joking around with them saying, if this was a Teams call, I would have said co-pilot, just do everything right, and it would have got done. But it's an honor to be a moderator for such a panel, and Samir kind of changed my talk track a little bit. I was about to say, among this panel, the analytics and AI collective experience about 100 plus years. But is that relevant in the next 3 years? I think this is what the panel will say today.
We're all enthusiasts.
Excellent. So, I mean, if you're looking at the topic, right, we were just debating about the topic some time back, and it's saying Gen AI for India. And when we look at Gen AI for India, we're saying, is it Gen AI for India? Which is largely all of us, right? Gen AI for India. And there is a Gen AI for Bharat, right? And we're seeing a lot of innovation happening in the Bharat side of the world as well. So if I was just looking at all these innovations that are being done today from a perspective of, if you've seen the newspapers the last week, IRCTC, I mean an organization which you would never have thought will use Gen AI, started using Gen AI for their contact centers. Imagine IRCTC, which gets about 200 calls a minute. Imagine 200 calls a minute, which none of the best call centers can handle, is now pivoting to use Gen AI for their contact centers. If you now look at Kisan.ai, Kisan AI is a way to democratize all the agricultural research that the country does, essentially taking agricultural research to the farmer there. He doesn't know English, he doesn't need to read and write. He just knows their local language, and he can ask questions saying, what can I do? What crops do I put in now? This is the condition of my crops. What do I do there? Or if you look at Jugalbandi, I mean, essentially looking at a framework in which natural language, Indian languages are being used to make government services accessible to people. So a tremendous amount of innovation is happening with generative AI, solving those unresolved problems in India. And here, we have this august panel to tell us, what they are seeing in their respective industries. So the way we'll do it is, I'll ask one question to the panel now. This is a kind of a general question for the entire panel, saying each of you, right, Srivatsa, Deepak, Dhruv, Dinesh, I mean, what is that one generative AI use case you saw is, kind of disrupting your industry? Those are use cases that you never would have thought would have been possible, and now you're looking at solving some of that. Maybe Srivatsa, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Swami, and good afternoon, everyone. I think that was a fantastic introduction. So, in terms of banking, right, I think one thing we have struggled with is underwriting automation. Considering the different languages, you have documents which are of different format in each state. And that is one thing that we are seeing that, we can use generative AI to sort of extract information from documents. That's where the multimodal models are very helpful. That's one area that is being solved today. The other area, I think, which will, become a problem area soon with increasing video KYC and also the increase in deepfakes, right? So there are two ways to look at, whether a person is real. One is passive. So someone is not putting a photograph in front of the camera. It's an actual person. The other is to check for liveliness. And the thing is that now you see that deepfakes are capable of sort of faking liveliness as well. And I think that's an area which will become a problem in the near future. At some point, someone will sort of just create an app and allow people to create accounts for other people at scale, right? And at that point, I think Gen AI will come in with traditional AI, in terms of the ability to identify that the person is real. So these are, I think, two use cases that I can think of.
Yep, I'll go next. So we work across use cases. I'll pick healthcare, right? It's a usually underserved market in India, in terms of the access to healthcare in India is challenging. And Gen AI can certainly help, alleviate that, right? So if you look at, there are multiple use cases, right, from the clinical research and, faster drug discovery, all the way through the care provision and then the more revenue cycle, billing, all those aspects. If I take one example, if you look at, the concept of ambient health is something that a few use cases we are now implementing. How do you empower and how do you improve the productivity of the care provider and essentially the doctors, right? How do you give time back? So one statistic said that 70% of the time that a doctor, for example, spends is on the administrative, right? The note taking, the searching for medicines, or really the whole diagnostic element is just at 30%, and the interaction, right, is very limited with the patient. So in the world where everything is personalized, why should healthcare be different? And the way you can get to that personalized healthcare is use the concept of ambient health, for example, right? So if you can have, Gen AI powered agent in the conversation between the doctor and the patient, that 70% can actually be switched to 30%, right? So you really, the Gen AI, for example, can do the summarization, can do the initial, coming up with predictions, for example, or coming up with some of the prescriptions, and then the time is spent more on the human interaction. What it will also do is essentially, instead of seeing 50 patients, the doctors can probably see 500 patients, right? So that access to healthcare can usually be improved for the India, especially across the tier 2, tier 3. So those are one example. There's also the concept of multimodal AI, right? So for example, a radiologist, can we empower them with multimodal AI and the AI doing a lot of that initial diagnosis, with then the validation and the approval being done by the radiologist. So again, I think healthcare, huge opportunity for using Gen AI, to improve patient experience, the productivity and burnout reduction of caregivers, and of course the whole administrative and the billing side of it.
Yeah, and Dhruv, your perspectives, any use cases you're seeing?
Yeah, I think in the world of health insurance and healthcare, the opportunities are immense. I mean, a lot is already being done, and there is a lot more to do. End of the day, this industry as such is focusing on people when they are very vulnerable, right? When they are financially vulnerable, physically, emotionally vulnerable. Imagine somebody who's at a hospital, right? So unless it's childbirth, it's not generally a very pleasant experience. And it's at that time where I think the way patient experience can be enhanced, the way policyholder experience can be enhanced. Things like, can you get discharged from the hospital in a few minutes? Can your queries be answered very quickly and in a very responsive and accurate way, right? Can you understand what products you are buying and what kind of deductions are being applied on your products, right? I think these are a whole bunch of very potential and very, very impactful use cases which can really disrupt the way, healthcare and health insurance is delivered in the country.
Yep, and Dinesh, your perspectives?
Yeah, I think we talked about banking, and I spent most of my life in banking, some in credit bureau, but I think most of the use cases we see, and they're astonishing because of the impact they make, but they're very focused on kind of solving the operational pain points. And so if you're an investment banker, you're busy sourcing deals, interacting with clients. You don't want to waste time building the pitch book, writing the detailed research, or in many cases just structuring the deal in a manner that is kind of not only profitable for us but very, very valuable for the client. So there's a ton of operational work, and even in the aspects of conversational AI, where we are interacting with our customers, understanding the context and really delivering a solution without any human intervention, and also some things where we're using RAGs internally to give kind of like answers from our legal teams, from our HR teams, from our policy and compliance team. So what that has done is it's made us so much more efficient, and the banker is able to focus, and not only a banker, even our internal modelers, they're able to focus so much more on the design, the innovation, and the customer value driving aspects of interactions. And I think that's seen a huge impact.
Yeah, and switching context, Dinesh, I think that's the right time to switch context to the Bharat side of the world as well. I mean, today, looking at credit scoring, looking at financial inclusion goals that the country has, how do you think this disruptive technology can help from a perspective of financial inclusion?
Yeah, I think we are at a very interesting stage in our country's growth. So financial inclusion obviously is an objective. Government has laid out quite a few objectives on priority sector lending. So it's not only about individuals' inclusion, it's about including microfinance, it's about including agriculture, and giving them access to credit that they've traditionally not had. If you look at it historically, people who've not had access to credit have paid immense cost just to replace that credit. And so if you're not able to get organized sector credit from banks and other financial institutions, your cost of an alternate source of credit is at least 2 to 3 to 4 times higher. And that's a tax we put on people just because they do not have a credit history or they do not have the means to show that they are reliable borrowers. And I think so as a risk manager, our job is to ensure that we are finding people who are low risk, whose probability of returning our loan is high, that it should not. So how do you expand that network is driven a lot by 2 or 3 things. One is driven a lot by the fact that if you do not have core credit information, then how do you integrate alternate sources of information? Now, those alternate sources of information could be multimodal, like we've discussed. Those alternate sources of information could be non-traditional, may not have nothing to do with credit, but are still predictive of somebody's responsible credit behavior. And I think that's an area where there's a lot of work going on in our ability to expand sources of information that we use to look at somebody's ability to take on credit. I think there's also a lot of information. So as a bureau, our job is to build an identity network or identity graph, understand a person and understand everything about that person. And so that you are not only doing credit, beyond a point you're able to service that customer through a variety of means. And that graph can be expanded through non-quantitative information. That graph can be expanded through unstructured information. That graph can be expanded through their behavior on a variety of different other opportunities that they have in their lives. If you bring all of it together and expand that identity graph or ability to look at somebody, I think we are able to not only get more people included in our credit ecosystem, we are also able to differentiate better on the people who are already in the credit ecosystem. And so that's a big deal. Another point that we have to worry about in our country, because we are a young country, we get a large population which is new to credit, who have never taken credit in their lives, and they are coming into a credit ecosystem, and our ability to differentiate risk at that point is also extremely critical. And again, no information. So how do you build alternate sources of information? How do you build a stronger identity graph for the whole population, not only the population that has access to formal credit, is a big leap that we have to make. I think there are immense possibilities. We're doing a lot of work and research in these areas. I think there'll be huge impact you will see in the near future.
Great perspectives, Dinesh. I think truly impressed with what you're doing. Srivatsa, coming back to India, right? I mean, that was a Bharat perspective, coming back to India. I mean, from a banking perspective, right? Today, the banking industry is very competitive. Customer experience is important. But at the same time, right, as you're looking at generative AI for customer experiences, how are you balancing that with all the regulatory requirements? Those are also evolving. So how do you find this balance in taking use cases to production?
Right. So there are a few things I will start with and then tie it to your question. First is when you want to pick a use case, and Samir spoke about ROI, right? We start with ROI. If you want to pick a big enough use case in the Indian context, because the salaries are lower, the impact has to be much higher, because the cost of tech, OpenAI, etc., is going to be the same. The second thing is Indian customers are very demanding. They don't have a lot of patience. The moment you get a call, someone says, "Good afternoon," most people cut the call, right? Because nobody I know wishes me good afternoon. They get straight to the point. So it's a telecaller, right? You don't want to talk to that person. The third thing that we deal with is a lot of attrition on the ground, which is a reality in branches, etc. Right? And the fourth thing you pointed about, which was the whole regulatory environment, because we are regulated and we have very strict laws in terms of that data should be stored in India, how ML can be used and so on. Now, when you combine all of this, and the fifth thing that because we are regulated, anything that goes wrong will get blown out of proportion on human in the loop. Now, in this context, there are few areas that, we see a lot of value in, right? First, with the attrition, the knowledge about products, processes, and the way regulations change, that's not there. And we have for example, we have 5,000 branches. ICICI, HDFC will have more, right? So in that context, getting that knowledge across to all the people is a challenge. So that's one area where you can use conversational bots. So customers walk into branches, you use your knowledge repository, which is updated once, say every month or whenever there's a regulatory update. You use that, you respond to customer queries. So there is customer satisfaction improvement, but it is indirect. It's not direct. The other big area that, again, is going to we are going to see an explosion in banking is how contact centers work. Today, and contact centers face worse attrition challenges than, branches and so on. So again, there it's going to be a mixture of automated voice bots, not the ones you hear today, but ones which will be far more advanced, which are able to respond to natural language, thereby, again, resolving customer queries very quickly. The second is if bots are not able to respond, then what? Then you have agents, and again, agents take 3 to 6 months to get productive, and most of them leave after that. Right? So that's a challenge. I think anyone who has run a call center knows is a real challenge. So that's where something like a real-time assist, I think there was a discussion in the morning also on that, a real-time assist for call center agents where they can, based on how the conversation is going, they are shown relevant content through which they can resolve questions faster. I think these are sort of two areas which I see banks can use to improve customer experience.
Yeah, great perspective, Srivatsa. And going to Dhruv, right? I mean, you represent one of the largest TPAs in the country. You see so much of healthcare data going through. I mean, from a perspective of experience again, right? How do you look at member beneficiary experiences in your business vis-a-vis how are you looking at fraud from a perspective, because you see fraud today, and as you do all of this, what kind of safeguards do you put around privacy, right? I mean, some perspectives around that.
No, great, Swami, thanks, a great question. If you look at health insurance, we've got sort of all the classical V's of big data, right? Volume, variety, veracity, velocity. So there are images, there are scans, there are bills, there is language, there is voice, there is everything to process every healthcare claim transaction, right? So that's a wide variety and volume of data we are talking about. One important aspect here is how do we safeguard insurers, beneficiaries, hospitals, groups, corporates, agents, everybody from fraud, waste, and abuse, right? This is a pretty serious problem, not only in the health insurance industry, but in the entire BFSI space as well. What it does is it reduces sort of the trust in the ecosystem, right? And if we look at the length and breadth of the country, north, south, east, west, there are thousands of hospitals, millions and millions of beneficiaries, thousands of agents, right? Dozens of health insurers. If we look at the kind of data that we receive, if we look at the kind of dynamicism in the kind of claims that we receive, the way treatments are getting modernized, the way products are getting modernized, tackling insurance, tackling fraud, waste, and abuse becomes challenging day by day, right? Of course, while there are certain kinds of some of these patterns which are repetitive, but at the same time, there are quite a few patterns which are, like we say, fraudsters are also very creative and innovative, right? So the nature of fraud also keeps changing, and that's why it's a whole bunch of AI engines, multiple types of machine learning, deep learning techniques that are being applied to detect and prevent fraud, waste, and abuse in the system, right? And of course, I think we all have seen a lot of advancements in the prevention, and I'm sure there is more to come. So that's one pretty important area for the entire industry. The second use case is, which is again very important, like I said before, is how do we enhance the experience of a patient and his family when they are, getting treated in a hospital, right? So it's a very vulnerable situation for anybody, right? Both financially, emotionally, as well as physically, right? And one of the challenges that they face many a times is Even after they are treated, they still have to wait for 3 to 6 hours before they can head out. Right? And that's because there is a lot of billing to be done, a lot of processing to be done, a lot of exchange of documents before the hospital can let them out. Right? So how do we use past patterns, AI techniques, Gen AI techniques to predict bills? Right? So that all the manual work of bill computations can be reduced. Right? And the patient can be discharged within a few minutes as soon as the doctor says yes. Right? So these are some of the pretty important use cases. I'm sure there are more when it comes to servicing people better, answering their queries better. I think this space is very, very ripe for all the disruptions that are happening. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dhruv. And Deepak, I was waiting for the best for the last because, I spoke to Deepak, some time back, and, if I looked at his experience, right, he covers all our experiences, right? He's worked in the financial services, he's worked on insurance, he's worked in healthcare. So, and that's how EvoluteIQ came to play, right? And for him, and the question for you is, Deepak, how do you look at EvoluteIQ? I mean, how do you look at Gen AI? Take a product like EvoluteIQ, a leader in the business process automation space. How do you think Gen AI can help you in your go-to-market?
Yeah. So I think, it's very central. I mean, the way we've approached it for the last 5+ years is actually very relevant to the theme today, right? Which is Gen AI is not enough. And I think we've always envisaged and built our solution technology to be an integrated platform. We're not solving part of the problem, we're solving the entire problem. So last year, I think Samir mentioned, right, there was euphoria last year, it's probably fizzled out. I think for us, it's actually been, a lot more grounding, right? So instead of Gen AI being a sort of a new shiny object, a lab project, we've always integrated it with the enterprise, the rest of the features in the enterprise. So, the short answer, I think, the entire go-to-market is predicated on how do we build business solutions faster, better, cheaper, right? And that's what the platform does. So if you're able to, build solutions for large unresolved problems, you want to hit the market quickly, right? So how do I build solutions in 4-6 weeks? Take it to market. Gen AI, of course, is a very important part of that, but building the data pipelines that connect with systems of engagement, systems of record, combining predictive AI with generative AI. We spoke about conversational interfaces across all our use cases. How do I build those out quickly? How do I then put the guardrails in terms of security and, the adoption, right? So all of that is something that, if you can do it in an integrated way, that's the key in our view to take things to market quickly without having to, spend 6 months putting 7 technologies together and then looking at the business problem. So in short, that's been our ethos. That's what we've been driving. And Gen AI fits very nicely into it in terms of, expanding our already integrated approach to things.
Yeah, and maybe we'll have some time for a rapid fire. I mean, we'll keep it really short. Otherwise, I'm getting a warning here already. So if, AI, Gen AI reaches the level of super intelligence or AGI, what is that one societal problem that each one of you would want to solve for India? Srivatsa.
I think education. We hear a lot about how our youth are unemployable. So if Gen AI can create content whereby people have sort of stronger fundamentals in whatever they study and are more employable, I think it'll be great.
That's great perspective, Srivatsa.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's infrastructure, right? I think India needs a lot of infrastructure push. There's great work happening, but I think if we can use, Gen AI technologies and others, right? So whether it is, smart, traffic management, whether it is grid management and making sure power is distributed, whether it's, resource management, how do I get, crops that are growing in one part of the country into the other part very quickly. So really that infrastructural aspects is what I would love AGI to sort of drive for us.
I think it's about making our nation healthier, providing quality healthcare access for everybody. I think that would be a fantastic use case.
Dinesh?
Yeah, actually, I was also going to say education, because not only expanded access to education, but also increasing relevance of what we teach. And because I see it with my kids all the time, they have so much curiosity and questions, but our education system just constrains them to not ask those questions till they are a little older. So why shouldn't we not kind of answer all the questions that people have at any given point of time and make them really more satisfied with the way they get educated?
Yep, and absolutely great, right? I mean, the Ministry of Education is also looking at Anuvadini, which is based on the Bhashini framework for Indian languages, for students, for educational content. A lot of things happening at the government level as well. But as I went through this panel, I was gathering my thoughts as we were concluding. And one thing that struck me was, machines are making us more human. They're making us better, more financially inclusive. They're making us give better healthcare services to people, better banking experiences, building a business. And I think that's where I feel the future of Gen AI for India and Bharat is. With that, I conclude this panel. Thanks a lot for sharing all your inputs.